Good evening and welcome to another edition of Money Talk with Melanie. I am your business diva, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live from what is indeed beautiful Cape May, New Jersey today. It's an absolutely gorgeous day, 80 degrees, thank goodness. And I'm coming to you via SHR Media and High Place Pundit Talk Radio. And welcome to the Facey Chat, Zena and Christopher and Cynthia. Welcome. I'm just happy because it's a gorgeous day today. My guest today is president of the Summit Taxpayers Association. He's also an author and a lawyer, and his name is Khurram Dara. He's going to talk to us today about taxpayer bailouts for private entities. He wrote this op-ed about something that's going on here in New Jersey, but it certainly goes on in other states all over the country. That we should be concerned about, where our taxpayer money is going to bail out entities that should be bailing themselves out. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation. Give a shout out to Doug and Michael. Welcome. And there's a couple people I missed because it was scrolling up, and I apologize. But I will shout you out, and I appreciate your being here. But before we talk about any of that, a bit of housekeeping. If you're not following me on Twitter yet, shame on you. You can follow me on Twitter at MoneyTalkMel. That is the show Twitter page, or at NJGOPDiva. If you really like to get your political commentary on, that's where you can follow me. There. And of course, you can like the Facebook page, which is at Money Talk with Melanie, shockingly. And I'm everywhere else, every other piece of social media like possible of your choice. I was going to call it G+, but that's not what it's called. It's called Google+. Google+, Pinterest, you name iTunes, of course, any of those podcast mechanisms or platforms, I should say, you can find me there. So that having been out the way. And tomorrow we're going to have Mike Fitzpatrick back on. We have not decided on the show topic yet, but I'm sure it'll be really good. Mike Fitzpatrick, as you all may know, is the founder and CEO of NCX Group. He's a cybersecurity expert, and there's always something cybersecurity to discuss, unfortunately. So I'm going to have him back on for his monthly visit tomorrow. So I'm super excited about that always. Let's see what's going on in the Money Talk News Report. Well, it seems that the tariffs, the Trump administration tariffs, I shouldn't really say it like that, that gave exemptions to certain countries, Mexico, the EU, and Canada. It was supposed to be their what do you call it, holiday, if you will, was supposed to be cut off today, and then the tariffs were supposed to kick in. Well, they've been given an extension on that, and this is the tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. But they've been given a 30-day reprieve. Now, for sure, this is going to mess with the market a little bit, but I think the market only ended up down like half a percentage point today. So that's not bad considering. But I'm beginning to wonder. It's just, I mean, usually he's like a man of his word and just does whatever he says he's going to do. And I just wonder if this is going to cause those countries to feel like they now have a bargaining chip. Hey, Ricky, cousin Ricky is here. Hey, Brian, welcome to the Facey Chat. So I'm wondering about that. I was a little bit like, oh, did he really give an extension? So we'll see. And I believe there's at least one or two countries that went ahead and made their own bilateral agreements with the United States one-on-one. So that which is kind of what I believe it's Japan, but kind of part of what Donald Trump wants, right? To just have these, these agreements one-on-one so that each country can kind of get the best deal possible, which makes sense. Okay. And really so that the United States can get the best deal possible. Let's keep it real. Have you ever heard of a gig economy? I'll tell you what the gig economy is, and I'll tell you why I'm bringing it up. A gig economy is that environment where there's temporary positions, and it's common for organizations to contract people out. It's usually for short-term engagements. It's referred to as a gig economy. Now, there's an estimation by Intuit that did a study that said by 2020, 40% of American workers will be independent contractors. And I brought that up because California just changed its classification for employees, meaning that those in the gig economy, or gig economy firms like Uber and Grubhub, right? You're an independent contractor when you work for any companies like that. They will not be able to call their workers independent contractors. Now, of course, this is in California, so it should really not be a shock. But there was a similar ruling in Massachusetts, and as someone who lives in New Jersey, no flipping surprise, also in New Jersey, as well as Massachusetts. So, but it's that's something to worry about, because what that means is they may have to start offering benefits. They may have to start doing a minimum wage thing. That defeats the whole purpose of their business model. That's the thing. I mean, you can pretty much like work as long as they want and make as much money as they want when they do. I know people who do Uber and Lyft and things like that, and you can do pretty well if you're in a good market. Where I live, because I live in no man's land, not going to make all that much money, but but that's a different story. I checked out Uber down here to do maybe in the summer or something like that, and there's maybe in the summer you can do it, but during the winter, forget about it. Forget it. Now, there's one more very important thing I want to mention before we go to break, is that private universities have offered record discounts this year, and their enrollment is still falling. Now, I say that's a good thing. It's a good thing for students, and it's a good thing because now college is not the end all to be all in order to make a good living. It's just not. I mean, it used to be like everybody has to go to college. Hey, Miss Kim that just joined the Facey chat. Hey, Miss Katina, I saw you, Daryl. But college is no longer the end all to be all, and supply and demand says the prices should be going down, frankly. And they need to go down significantly. People are getting beat. Sorry. You have these huge, and I work for a college, so don't tell my college I said that. Because I am an adjunct professor at a university. But, it is, to me, a huge, unless you have something very specific that requires a lot of schooling, college is a little bit of a ripoff. Just putting it out there for the amount of money. So I'm glad to see that their prices are falling. And like I said, basic economics would say that it's starting to drop off. It should be. But anywho, I'm already behind for my break. Surprise, surprise. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. My guest today is Khurram Dara. He is a lawyer and also the president of the Summit Taxpayers Association. We're going to talk to him about the growing trend, I should say. It's actually been going on for quite a while, about taxpayer bailouts for private entities. Can't wait to talk to him about that. We'll be back in a few moments.
Another leftist judge throws U.S. sovereignty and our Constitution right under the bus. LOI, Ron Edwards on today's page from the Edwards Notebook. U.S. District Activist Judge John D. Bates has ordered the Trump administration to reopen and review applicants who apply for deportation protections under the Defense Action for Childhood Arrivals program. The judge also gave an ultimatum saying that the Department of Homeland Security has 90 days to provide solid reasoning for why the program should be terminated. Forget the fact that former President Obama imposed DACA on the United States to protect more than 800,000 children of illegal immigrant parents who were not authorized to legally be in the United States. The judge also falsely accused Trump of not explaining why he ended DACA. Bradford Berry, General Counsel of the NAACP, expressed glee at the judge's decision to rule on behalf of criminals who have strolled into our republic illegally. I find that ironic that a so-called proponent of helping colored people would be happy that a leftist judge ruled on behalf of illegal immigrants who have been systematically helped by American leftists to displace many Black Americans regarding economic opportunities, etc. The problem is, Mr. Berry's hatred of America and her sovereignty supersedes his desire to help colored people. I Ron Edwards. Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. It was Ron Edwards' notebook that you just heard, a brand new Ron Edwards notebook, and killer as per usual. My goodness gracious. I always wait, even though I get his notebook ahead of time, I always like to wait till the show to listen to it because they're always so good. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. And his show, the Ron Edwards Experience, actually comes on here on SHR Media, High Place Pundit Talk Radio. I think it's every day now. It used to just be Friday, right before my show at 4. But I believe it's every day now. He will probably put it in the Facey chat because I see that he has popped up there. Okay, let's talk about my guest, shall we? My guest's name is Khurram Dara. He is not only a lawyer, but he's also the president of the Taxpayer Association in Summit, New Jersey, which is huge. He is also a member of the Energy and Infrastructure Group. He's a lawyer at Orrick, Harrington, and Sutliff. I hope I'm pronouncing all of that right. Where he's a member of the Energy and Infrastructure Group. Prior to that, he was a corporate associate at Cahill Gordon and Rendell LLP, where he focused on capital markets and banking transactions. He's also an author, having appeared on cable news and talk radio, and has written op-ed pieces for several publications, including Wall Street Journal, CNN, and Forbes. Dara earned a JD from Columbia Law School and a BBA from Emory, so he's one very, very smart cookie, and I'm very excited to have him on the show. Without further ado, welcome, Khurram Dara. How are you?
Hi, Melanie. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I wish it were under better circumstances because the bill referenced in the op-ed that you mentioned earlier has actually passed, and now it awaits signature from the governor. He might veto it, but he's probably going to sign it, and that's a very sad thing. And I know you have listeners all over the world, and this episode is really just an example, like a case study, really, and why I think people really hate politicians and all that's wrong in the political system. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come on.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree. When I saw your op-ed, I was like, oh, wow, this is definitely something to talk about on the show. Facey peeps, and those of you who might be listening on SHR Media or High Place Pundit, if you're not in the Facey chat, go grab it. There's a link to it in the Facey chat. So tell us about this bill and why it is really not only a disaster for New Jersey, but similar bills in other states are a disaster because it happens all over the place, just with different entities, different companies. It's something that taxpayers really need to watch out for. So tell us about it.
Right. So the short summary here is towards the end of the last administration in New Jersey, the Christie administration, PSE&G, which is the state's largest gas and utility company, made it known to the powers that be in the state's capital that they believed they needed a price increase on electricity. They needed a rate increase in order to subsidize their already profitable nuclear facilities. And what they told lawmakers was that if they didn't get the subsidy they wanted in the form they wanted it, that they would have to close down 2 facilities in South Jersey, which of course would result in thousands of jobs being lost, which nobody wants, and of course could also impact energy prices, making more electricity more expensive because of the constrained supply. Now, I want to say just at the outset, because whenever these issues come up about bailouts of big corporations, one of the things that is often said about people who do not support the subsidy is that they are, not being practical or are being naive or don't understand the quote unquote reality of the situation. But I want to make one thing very clear. You mentioned I spent part of my career focused on the energy sector. I actually work at a company now, no longer at the law firm. But I, as a personal matter, actually do support nuclear energy. I think it's a great energy source. New technology has made it safer. I'm an all of the above energy guy. And a state like New Jersey, something like 39-40% of our energy comes from nuclear sources. You see it used in Europe quite a bit. And the thing to remember is make no mistake about it. This bill is not about whether you support nuclear energy or clean energy. It's not about whether you want to keep facilities open. Of course, everybody wants as many facilities to be open and as many jobs to be retained in a state as possible. This bill is really about whether the state of New Jersey is going to be bullied by a big corporation that has deep ties to Trenton and deep pockets in order to subsidize, themselves, their shareholders, people at the expense and all on the backs of people in New Jersey who, as you know, Melanie, quite frankly, have enough to deal with the property tax burden and in terms of the number of federal dollars that the state sends to D.C. versus what they get back. Because any way you look at this bill, whether it's the form or the substance of it, any way you slice it, it's bad. It's bad and highly problematic for the state. Just substantively, I mean, you're talking about subsidies for facilities in a company that's already profitable. You have changes to statutory protections around ratepayers in terms of the Division of Rate Counsel and the role that they play. And you have benefits going to other states at the expense of people and on the backs of people in New Jersey. And then the form of this, and this is where your listeners in other states will know exactly what I'm talking about. When you listen to the way this bill was forced through, other states like Connecticut and Illinois took 2 years and 3 years respectively to work through these issues in their legislatures. In New Jersey, they tried to ram it through in a lame duck session at the end of one term. Now they're trying to do it at the beginning of a new term with the new governor, Phil Murphy. And, layer into it that the two facilities that PSE&G threatened to close just so happen to be located in the district of the most powerful legislator in the state, the Senate President, Steve Sweeney.
Oh, no.
And the cherry on top is really, and the cherry on top of the whole thing has been the sales pitch. We are being told not to think of this as a $900 million subsidy over 3 years. We should look at it as a $300 million per year subsidy, or $31 per month per person in the state, or $3 a day. It's like an infomercial for OxyClean. It's not $100; it's 4 payments of $24.99. The whole thing is totally ridiculous. It's offensive. Quite frankly, it's offensive. But it's one of those things that you mentioned. It happens all of the time where you have big, powerful interests that use their influence to get benefits at the expense of everybody else.
Okay, my mouth is whenever I have shows like this where a guest, is talking and they're telling me stuff, my mouth is wide open. I'm inclined to say nothing and just keep my mouth open, but it turns out that that's like really bad radio. I'm just kidding. But listen, being around politics, I'm not that appalled, but at the same time, I'm really appalled. Because the connections are so flippin' obvious. And it happens all over the country, and it happens federally. So let me ask you this. PSE&G, of course, was more than happy to open their books and let legislators or anyone, any accountants or whoever that are on the government roll, any accountability offices, review their records to see that they actually do need the money before we give it to them, right? They were willing to do that.
Melanie, that would make way too much common sense. That would make way too much sense. Of course, we would have liked for that to have happened. And folks like me who say, look, I personally am a person who generally does not support subsidies, but I recognize that government subsidize things all the time. I understand that there might be situations in which you have to bail things out, you have to provide subsidies, but we have methods and procedures in place for this reason. And to your point, there's something in New Jersey called the Division of Rate Counsel. It's a statutorily designed and created position for someone to be at the table on decisions regarding, for example, utility rates, representing the interests of ratepayers. For example, in this bill, there are things done to cut her name is Stephanie Grant, to cut her out of the process, right? So that she would only be, involved if she was deemed to be essential to the process. PSE&G has not provided a full accounting of why they need the subsidy and why that particular number that they landed on, how they came to that calculation. The bill is designed so that the ratepayers are on the hook for 3 years no matter what. Even if it turns out the subsidy is way more than PSE&G needs because, for example, as this happened previously in history, early in the 90s, if there's some deregulation of how nuclear facilities operate, that might result in a higher bottom line, right? PSE&G gets all the benefit of the upside, and we have to cover their downside risk. And so we're on the hook no matter what. for 3 years. That's why I said earlier, it's not really $300 million a year. It's $900 million over 3 years, because even if it turns out that they don't need all of that money, it's set up so that they get it. There's no mechanism in place to say, hey, look, if it turns out that, you don't need as much, we can recalibrate things and take some of the subsidy back or reduce it to some extent. None of the basic things that you would want. And that's part of the reason why I mentioned, not just in substance, in the form, the way in which this was done. And the refusal to be really fully transparent and trying to rush this through and using it almost, folks who aren't from New Jersey may not be familiar, but in the middle, this is a new administration. There's a lot of political gamesmanship going on between the new government, the new governor's office, and the various special interests in a state like New Jersey. And this is being kind of thrown into that, where the politics of the political reality suggests that the governor, who ran a campaign on telling people in the state that he was going to, quote unquote, have their back, right, is going to let this big corporation essentially
have their back so he can reach in your pocket and get their wallet.
Exactly, subsidize their already, this is a key point, subsidies for already profitable facilities. It's hard to fathom.
Now, listen, I understand that our new governor is an absolute leftist, so I'm not even gonna get into the free market implications here. We know, and I'm sure that they didn't think that they were going to be able, and maybe they could have gotten this under Christie or I call or Kim Guadagno. I refer to her as KJ, but because we actually are in some organizations together. But the lieutenant governor and the person who ran against Phil Murphy. For the education of those who don't live in New Jersey. Right. But it just seems to me that in the free market situation that they should be able to fend for themselves. And if they can't, if they're getting a subsidy, just like any other entity that is giving you money, if you were going to go get a car loan, I don't know, they're going to look through your finances and see if, how much you need. They're going to look and see. Any other government entity that's giving you money, you have to, they crawl up your financial hiney and figure out everything that is going on. But this is not the case here.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a situation, some context here is helpful. So in energy markets, what has happened over the last several years is natural gas, and this is, there was a lot of discussion about fracking several years ago. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know. Hydraulic fracking has opened up a lot of new doors in terms of natural gas, and it turns out that the U.S. has a shale of natural gas, and that has really changed the nature of energy markets. Oil prices and similarly other forms of energy like nuclear have suffered a little bit because of the success of natural gas. And so the context here is PSE&G is worried that their plants may not be as profitable as they have promised their investors or as they would like their investors to have in terms of a rate of return. And so they're trying to build up some cushion and some protection for themselves. But you're absolutely right. I mean, these are the types of considerations that you would prefer to leave to the market. And it's funny, an interesting thing happens when you start opening up these doors for subsidies, because here you have a company like PSE&G that is the state's, like I mentioned, state's largest utility. They have quite a bit of bargaining power. You'll find that they have a whole lot of money they invest in lobbying, in terms of government, what they call, quote unquote, government relations.
Oh yeah.
They have access. And in economics, there's this concept known as, concentrated benefits and dispersed costs. And I mentioned the sales pitch they keep giving everyone. Oh, it's only $3 a day per person. When you frame an issue where a lot of people have to pay a little bit, and a few people stand to gain a lot one way or another, like PSE&G in this case, they have a lot to gain on whether this bill passes or not. Then they're much better incentivized to go ahead and lobby for those positions. And then the negotiating power, the leverage is just so much stronger with a company like PSE&G versus all of the different taxpayers and ratepayers that are spread out across the state. And it's not set up for a fair fight. The system is supposed to be designed so that the elected officials are supposed to be looking out for our interests. We all know for a whole host of reasons that is not in many contexts does not come to fruition in the way we would like. And so, additional things are done, like in the state of New Jersey, establishing a division of rate counsel, somebody whose job it is to represent ratepayers. And then you have, in the bill, changes to the role that they would play to kind of reduce and minimize that effort. And these are the types of things that happen when you start telling people that the government is open for business, right? You invite these folks to, invest time and resources that could really otherwise be going to capital development, improving their products and services, lowering transaction costs. Instead, what they do is they actually increase transaction costs. They put a burden on the whole system, and they create a barrier to entry for other potentially competitive, outside of the context of utilities, for example. When you set that up and provide a regime for subsidies, you essentially, in some sense, pick winners and losers. And you set up a barrier to entry to competition, which, what we were talking about earlier, you want markets. And when we say markets, a lot of times people say, oh, what do you mean this amorphous? Markets are made up of people. They're individual choices that consumers make, and those are often the best indicators of quality and price. You don't want to you want to limit the number of distortions in the system.
Absolutely, because you really, and particularly with an entity that is this large, you really are messing with the economy big time. I had a question in the Facebook chat, it was a really good one, and of course I could expand on a little bit. But Ken McClinton in the Facey chat, by the way, inventor of Money Talk with Melanie and the Business Diva, without whom this show would not exist. He's in the Facey chat, and he asked how New Jersey is going to deal with taxpayers that end up leaving and going to, say, Delaware. Yeah, they ain't going to Pennsylvania, but they're leaving.
It's funny that question is asked, right? Because a few years ago in New Jersey, there was a hedge fund manager by the name of David Tepper. He was a New Jersey resident, and because of the tax burden on somebody like him, who was a very high wealth individual, high income earner, he decided, eventually to relocate to Florida. The impact was so severe that it actually impacted budget projections because of the amount of tax that one person was responsible for paying in the state. And, there were a bunch of, so you can find it on Google, there are a bunch of news stories. It's an excellent question, I think, for the 5th year in a row now. Maybe we're running on 6 years in a row. I don't know. The 5th year in a row, I think. New Jersey had more people leave the state than come into it, which is, the worst ratio compared to any other state in the country. It's a real problem. And I don't know that there's an answer for what the state is doing. Sometimes people say, what we need is more subsidies. If we could attract a business, Amazon there's the whole, part of the presentation of all the different subsidies and incentives to give Amazon as they're making the decision where to relocate. I tend to think if you have a bad business climate and a bad tax environment, the solution is not to tax more and spend more on subsidies to get people to come set up businesses. Maybe, a not so wild and crazy idea would just be to try to lower those barriers and to try to make a more business-friendly environment for everybody. So you're not kind of picking, winners and losers and giving big corporations with a lot of resources a tremendous advantage over everyone else.
For sure. I mean, it's not a real business-friendly environment if the people that you're trying to market to don't have any money.
Exactly.
Or don't have any work, or don't have, places like Amazon. You're talking about, disposable income a lot of times. Sometimes maybe not, because they do groceries and everything else now. But for the most part, you are talking about disposable income. We do have Amazon now here, and there are here specifically with New Jersey, and I think New Jersey is like the East Coast California. We have. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
We're like California light, but on the East Coast. I mean, even politically, what our government is doing here in New Jersey with trying to become a sanctuary state, and all the other things that they're doing to add this to the mix. And I love what you said about it's only $300 million a year, and if you break it down, that's only such and such per family. That's exactly what like car dealers do.
Exactly.
No money down. for no money down and 0% interest for 6 months. Well, yeah, do you really think they're giving you that for free? No, it's included in the price. It's smoke and mirrors.
One other thing I was going to say, because you mentioned some excellent points, and you were talking earlier about the gig economy. All of these issues are interrelated. Politicians, your listeners in other states who might be going through similar situations, big corporation trying to get a subsidy or bailout, you'll see that politicians try to frame these issues as binary, and they try to silo them, right? What you see proponents of this bill say is, oh, this is about whether you support clean energy or you want cheaper energy, or you want to save jobs, and they try to make it into this one simple thing. But to your questioners, the ask that we got about, what New Jersey is doing about out-migration, well, it turns out that millennials also are choosing not to live in New Jersey either. So you have this problem of young people not coming in. You don't have as many businesses coming in. You have people leaving the state. You have, changes in the economic environment that everybody knows are causing a lot of disruption. And so these issues really have impacts across other areas. And I think understanding that and taking a holistic approach is really important, because if you focus and frame an issue in one really narrow way, then you can always kind of convince people that you can only look at this issue in this way, and everybody that looks at it is wrong, or they're being unreasonable, or they're not thinking practically, when really these issues tend to be a lot more complicated than they initially seem.
Absolutely. You're so right about that. We're up against a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about perhaps what taxpayers can do, not only in New Jersey but in other states, how they can keep an eye on these things. So a lot of times, these things are happening in our state's capitals, and Joe Q. Public and Jane Q. Public are completely unaware that it's even going on. So I'd love to talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I am your business diva, Melanie Collette. My guest today is Khurram Dara. He is the president of the Summit New Jersey Taxpayer Association, and I'm thrilled to have him here. We're talking about taxpayer money going to bail out private entities and how lame it is, quite frankly. We will be back on the other side of the break.
Who likes paying taxes? Nobody. That's why Eva Rosenberg from TaxMama.com wants you to pay less of them. Read Small Business Taxes Made Easy and learn how legally hiring your spouse and children can slash your taxes. Learn how to set up a business plan that minimizes taxes, the benefits of setting up an exit plan, how to avoid getting audited, and how to legally increase your deductible expenses with better record-keeping techniques. Don't let the IRS squeeze you out of every penny. Visit TaxMama.com. Click on Ask a Tax Question to get free answers to your tax and business questions. That's TaxMama.com.
My name is David Barnett, and I've been helping people buy and sell small and medium-sized businesses since 2008. So far this year, I've gone on 5 vacations. It's because I've got my own business. When you get tired of being managed by someone else and you decide that business ownership is right for you without the risk of starting your own unproven enterprise, then come over to businessbuyeradvantage.com. There are over 100 YouTube videos on buying and selling businesses that you can watch for free. That's businessbuyeradvantage.com.
Welcome to this week's Money Talk Minute with your business diva, Melanie Collette. This week, we talk 3 things you should stop buying today. The first thing is cable TV. There are many options to replace cable TV, including Hulu, Netflix, and even Amazon Prime. The second thing is music. Please stop purchasing CDs. Again, there are several more cost-effective ways to listen to your favorite tunes for free or almost free, such as YouTube or Amazon Prime. And then finally, impulse buys. These are probably the worst. If it's not planned, don't buy it. This may require you to leave the credit cards at home or only shop with a predetermined amount of cash, but you can do it. That's all for this week's Money Talk Minute. I am your business diva, Melanie Collette. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 4 p.m. Central, and 2 p.m. West on SHR Media, High Plains Pundit Talk Radio, and streaming live on Facebook.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network. Hey, it's Sean from the Taxpayers radio show. Also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcast. sackheadsradio@gmail.com. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the Bouvier Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern. Only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this.
Pretty politicians, shadow government, skeptics, find the world with fake stream media smoke. Their only fear is one man with cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through shrmedia.com, planestalkradio.com, and the Western Free Radio Network. That's Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes for a different perspective weekly on the Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's nurturing the ever, because truth is not always pleasant.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. I am your business diva, Melanie Collette, and my guest today is Khurram Dara. He is the president of the Summit Taxpayer Association, and you've got a very important op-ed, which really spoke to me, not only being a New Jerseyan, but I thought it definitely applies to states all over the country that are dealing with similar situations where politicians are giving subsidies and breaks and bailouts to private entities. And in this case, we're talking about PSE&G, but certainly other entities are doing this as well. And actually, you know what, Khurram, I'm thinking that this doesn't even really qualify as a bailout, does it? I mean, if they're already profitable, we're really just
normally you don't think of bailouts for situations in which somebody's already profitable. They're really I'm just referring to it as a subsidy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, if taxpayers are going to be giving them some money, it should be a bailout. Like they're in trouble and all the nuclear plants are going to close down all over the state and we'll all be without energy. Okay. Well, maybe a bailout. Shelly in the chat said, they should have learned from the 2008 bank bailout that taxpayers weren't real happy about that situation. And they really
look, taxpayers will never be, you would think they would never be happy with the situation after it happens. But you mentioned earlier what they can do. We can talk a bit more about that. It's always unfortunate because it seems everybody's upset after, but before, folks don't really pipe up and get engaged.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. How first of all, how do we find out when bills like this are afoot? And I do realize it's going to take some proactive participation on our part. But share with the audience how you even find out that these things are happening with your government and how your government's spending your money.
Sure. So look, the first thing is, I know everybody's focused on national media. National media is oftentimes more entertaining, I guess you could say, but you can follow your local news. Local news sources, whether it's traditional or new mediums, like North Shore Pod. People on the ground are closer to these issues, and you're going to find out or read about a new bill or something that's happening in one of those local sources first, more often than not. Being involved locally wherever you are, again, I know the national political scene is often much more exciting. It seems like that's where the most action is. But the truth is, you can always have way more of an impact on the local level compared to the type of impact you might have, working on a statewide campaign or a national campaign. So staying engaged locally, almost everywhere, especially in states like New Jersey and you mentioned California that have ridiculous tax burden, there will be a local taxpayers union or alliance or organization like we have in Summit You should definitely join, stay involved. And then when politicians come in town to do town halls or to give stump speeches, ask them tough questions. Spend some time reading up on the issue, if it's a particular bill, and ask them to take a position and try to hold their feet to the fire. Because ultimately what needs to happen is, people need to get out and vote, and the folks in office need to feel the consequences of their actions if they're taking actions that are contrary to what's best for the majority of residents. And the last thing I'll say, on what people should do is do all of the first three things I mentioned with a smile. This is a battle for hearts and minds often, and you're up against. Don't forget that how powerful some of the interests that you are up against are. These are well-funded, well-capitalized organizations who are in the business. This is a business decision for them to put money and resources into what we call government relations. And so, being affable, trying to come across, and I think oftentimes that what these organizations and companies will do is they paint folks that oppose these issues as just kind of naysayers, as people who don't like anything getting done, as obstructionists, as people who don't understand, like I mentioned earlier, the realities of how things get done. And that's just not true. And I think, folks that are out there that make your point strongly and with conviction, but do it in a very thoughtful and presentable way.
I agree with you completely. As someone who works on a local campaign every single year, because of the way our municipality is set up, that's just, we're fighting for our lives every single flipping year. And I tend to work on local campaigns and as things permit, maybe a state campaign, or 2016 was so fiery, I worked on the Rubio campaign as well. But you have to.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was great. But you have to pay attention, right? And it's hard because we're involved with our families and sports and our own drama. But this is when you're complaining about the high taxes, and a lot of times we don't even look to see why the tax bill is so high. There's something called the Sunshine Law in most states, which means that the government has to reveal to you what they're doing and when they're meeting and making decisions on certain things. And what they usually do is put it in some local paper, and they're fulfilling the law. So what that means for us as voters is, okay, well, we got to go look.
Yeah, and think about it this way. I mentioned concentrated benefits and dispersed costs. The one nice thing about the arrangement, right, between all of the various dispersed taxpayers and the central powerful corporate interests that generally lobby in state capitals for subsidies and other tax breaks and incentives, right, is that there's way more of us. And one way to think about it is that you don't have to, one person does not need to come up with a solution to this by themselves. But if all of us do a little bit, just do a little bit, I know we've got, our obligations with our families, with work, with everything else going on in our lives, and all the different issues that we face as a country, as a state, wherever you are. But the silver lining is that, if we all put a little bit of effort, we'll all hopefully be better off.
I agree. Now, where is this bill so far? Did it pass one of the houses? Where is it in the process?
It passed earlier this month, and now at this point, it is at the governor's desk awaiting his signature. He may have already signed it. I'm not sure. I imagine he's going to not, which is going to be a change of pace for him because he makes a big he does. But I imagine he's not going to want to advertise this one, given how deeply unpopular it has been kind of across the board. But most folks, most of the kind of seasoned political observers in New Jersey believe that he will not veto it, that he's going to sign it into law, especially considering that the two facilities are located in the district of the Senate President, Steve Sweeney, who he needs really in order to get a lot of his agenda, which he promised voters, when he ran, done.
Oh, absolutely. Sure he did. And anybody who knows anything about New Jersey politics knows what's going on there. So,
it's funny because we mentioned earlier that you promised to have the backs of New Jerseyans. I just want to point out two really interesting things and action teams with respect to energy, because I think it's just an illustration of why why folks really just can't stand politicians. So early on in his administration, I'm sure you know, Phil Murphy had a number of executive orders put out, and two of them stand out in my mind relating to energy. One is that he banned fracking in the state of New Jersey, and the other is that he banned offshore drilling off the coast of New Jersey. The interesting thing is that however you feel about those issues, do you know how much fracking has taken place in the state of New Jersey? Zero, because there are no proven natural gas reserves in the state. Do you know how much offshore drilling has occurred off the coast of New Jersey? Zero, because there are no proven reserves there either. So, he had a grand spectacle on a press conference announcing that he was, putting in an executive order to stop. It's not really a problem here, at least now. And yet we have this issue, this just right in front of everybody's faces. Everyone can see exactly what's going on. The lack of transparency, the rushing through of this bill, the lock-in period for 3 years guaranteed, and the governor who supposedly has the backs of New Jersey is nowhere to be found.
That is absolutely incredible, and I might argue that he's not nowhere to be found. I would argue, I would argue that he probably fully knew about all of this before it hit his desk. That's what I would argue, and I would further argue that if we followed the money, we'd find some pretty big donors to the Murphy campaign.
So I'm sure PSE&G's folks. I'm sure they're any lobbyists related to them. I'm sure there's lots of overlap everywhere among all politicians.
Oh, it is. It's everywhere, and that's the dirty, ugly part of politics. The part that I don't particularly like. Like I'm all about helping my community and all that kind of stuff. But man, there are some. All of those limitations and things that they put on campaign finances and all that stuff, it is all a bunch of buffoonery. And the higher up you go, the bigger the level of buffoonery. It is. Just is.
Yeah, special interest money is a problem.
Yeah, like no, they didn't donate, but their wife donated. Like, I mean, it's that kind of crap. Mm-hmm. It's just ridiculous. So I want to thank you so much for that article. I posted in the Facey chat, and I want to thank you for being on the show today. You did a fantastic.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Fabulous job. Maybe you can come back and talk about your book next time, if you're willing to come back.
Maybe we should. Definitely.
I like that. What's the title? Let's tell everybody the title of your book anyway, and where they can get it.
So it's a book about religious history. It's called Contracting Fear: Islamic Law in the Middle East and Middle America, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and any other bookstore.
I have a bunch of Christian conservatives, including myself, who would probably be very interested in reading something like that. So that is not.
I think it would be a great conversation and dialogue.
Absolutely. So perhaps next month we'll chat. Thank you so much. I want to thank. Yep, indeed. I want to thank everybody in the Facebook chat, everybody on High Plains Pundit Talk Radio and SHR Media. You guys absolutely rock. If you were listening to this via podcast download, thank you for doing that. I truly do appreciate you all listening to me. And remember, all of this is very important because after all, it's your money. Have a great night.